thank you all for joining. Gosh, it's incredible. We've got so many amazing people here, people from all across the world, lots of people from India and Ireland and Gambia and Zambia, and so many different countries. I probably won't manage to name them all. So you're all extremely welcome, and it'll be really exciting to hear from you and hear what you think about the book. So I'm going to just start sharing my screen. So the webinar today is focused on our book, which is called The Changemaker's Guide to New Horizons, Organising Differently for a Sustainable Future in a COVID-19 World. And so I'm just going to run through a little overview of the book for those of you that might not have read it, although I'm sure some of you might have read it as well. And we're really excited that we've got some of our chapter authors and contributors on this call today. So really exciting to see you. So the book itself has 13 chapters, and they were written by about 20 different people from our Caplor community. And they cover a real range of different themes, all about sort of next generation organizations and how we can organize differently to be more sustainable. So we've got topics such as how to become a learning organization, how to be a proactive organization, a connected organization, a human organization, and more. I won't read them all. You can see them on the screen. And we focused the book around one of our models called the Caplor House, and this helps them sort of situate the readers within the chapter, and each chapter gives some interesting, exciting learning about the topic, some new innovative ways that you can sort of think about this topic, how you can adapt it to your work. And each chapter has a green page, which we've put an example of here, which we call the kitchen section, which gives you an idea of some interesting questions you might think to ask about that topic, some further reading that you might look to do. So yeah, so this is our book, and we're really, really excited to have some speakers today who'll be speaking a little bit more about it, and then we'll be going into some groups to discuss some of the themes and think about how we might use the book. So I will now pass over to Lorna. You're muted, Lorna.
Sorry, thank you, Rosie. So I'm just going to whiz through a plan for today. We're going to hear from Sharon, Kamal and Lynn, who have all been authoring different chapters in the book. We're then going to break out into breakout rooms, just so we can have a discussion about reflections on the book, or just discuss it in more detail in smaller groups of about 6 or 7. Then we're going to come back together and again just share as a big group reflections from the discussions, and then we're going to close. So the whole session will finish after an hour and a half, and just to make it smooth running, because it's amazing we've got so many people, but often when you have so many people you can get interference from people's backgrounds. So if we could ask you to put your microphone on mute when you're not speaking. Obviously in the breakout rooms you don't have to, but in the large group, then that helps everyone to be able to understand. And also we are planning on recording the session, and the bits we're going to record are the presentations from the speakers and the plenary. This is so that we can forward this on to some of our colleagues, friends who haven't been able to make it today. But just to let you know that in the breakout rooms, this will be a confidential space just to throw ideas around. So the breakout rooms won't be recorded. And we would also urge you to use the chat box with any comments, any questions you might have that we can respond to either during the session or afterwards. And if you have any questions in the groups that come up that you might want to ask other speakers, then we can do that on the plenary at the end as well. So that's the plan for today, and I'm going to hand over to Ian.
Great, thank you very much. Rosie, if we could, thank you. Next slide. So just to thank everybody again for attending today, and particular thank you to all these names that are on the screen in front of you now. 20 people have been very substantially involved with creating this book and more beyond that. And the names of different people are in front of you. So big celebration and appreciation to everyone. Particularly, I just want to draw out the people by way of introduction who are going to speak shortly. So Sharon has been a chapter author as well as the editorial team on the editorial team. So Sharon is a professor of leadership and has got a background in business and in academia, and will be leading after me. Then she will hand over to Kamal, who's worked a lot in the international development sector as in a leadership role. He's currently in the leadership role of Paper Boat, which is a partner to Caplor Horizons. So that'll be Kamal. And then we'll hand over to Lynn, who's very experienced as well, including in academia, but in business as well, and in different sectors. And she, along with Kamal and Sharon, have been very involved with the book. So Lynn as a chapter author, Kamal as a critical friend, and as I was already described with Sharon. So many thanks indeed to you all, and hand over now to Sharon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to see so many of you here today. 52 at the moment, which is wonderful. Yeah, I thought the first thing I ought to do is to turn back the clock and tell you that the idea from a book, I looked back at my files and found that it all started in May 2018, so actually more than 2 years ago. And a group of us from Caplor Horizons were having a conversation about obviously the challenges of this world, how fragile the planet and society is, and also that organizations seem to be not changing fast enough. So the way many organizations are run are still along the old models of top-down leadership and steep hierarchies and so on. And we'd already started at Caplor Horizons to try to work differently. But we wanted to think about how organizations across all sectors, but focusing particularly in the third sector, but actually in all sectors, could work in different ways. And those conversations eventually led us to think that perhaps we could work together in a kind of creative way across our community, across the globe, to think about how we could do things differently and how we could capture that in a book, with a view to delivering a more sustainable future. So make a contribution. And we were very much inspired by Maya Angelou's quote there: do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, do better. And we're constantly within the Caplor Horizons community striving to do better. And this was way before COVID-19, and we were already concerned about the world. And then came the pandemic, and it seemed, as we were writing this book, that what we were writing was even more relevant and even more urgent. Thanks, Rosie. The next slide, please. Thank you. And our focus was very much on the now, but also the future, inspired by many thinkers, many people thinking about what does it mean to have a more sustainable future. Both of these are lovely quotes. So Arundhati Roy, the author, this quote: another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. And actually, I think all of us have seen that that could be happening more as the world has shut down for COVID-19. But we can't actually respond to that unless our organizations are organized differently. And Wangari Maathai, the Kenyan activist who was planting trees across Kenya: there comes a time when humanity is called to shift to a new level of consciousness. That time is now. And we felt the time was right to write this book. Thanks, Rosie. So what did we hope from the book? Well, we wanted it to be a collaborative venture. We wanted to work very seamlessly. We didn't want to work in a hierarchical way. We wanted to generate lots of ideas across the community. And we wanted everybody in the community who was going to be involved in the book to be able to showcase their best selves. We knew we had lots of knowledge and talent and experience and interest and imagination within our community. We didn't want rules. We didn't want to do a book in a formalized way. And Lynn's going to talk more about the experience of that in a few moments. We wanted to be creative. We wanted to have some fun. We wanted to learn from each other through the process of writing and collaborating. And we wanted to refresh and extend our knowledge as we were writing. And showcase to outside out there to other communities the ideas and experience that we were sharing and learning and evolving. So a book for us would be a contribution, a voice that would help to bring about some real change in the way organizations organize and leaders lead for a more sustainable world. Thanks, Rosie. So leadership, the book's about organizing, but it's also about leading. And so it's important, I think, to just say a few words about what we were thinking about in terms of leading and leadership. And our model of leadership would be very different from the traditional model of leadership. So a few quotes from the book. The first is leaderful organizations where anyone can be a leader no matter what their perceived role, position, stage of their career or ability. So when we talk about leadership in the book, we talk about leadership at all levels. Very much inspired by Lalou, who wrote the book Reinventing Organizations, who said organizations must become organic living entities, more values-based, more society-focused, and devolved with a distributed leadership philosophy and practice. So again, when you read the book, you will find that leadership is seen as everywhere in the organization, no matter how the organization is organized. And the third quote, leaders who are constantly learning and growing to wholeness while serving the greater good and the interconnected whole or web of community. I think that's from Lynn's chapter. So I think we were thinking about leadership using that wonderful metaphor of leadership as water, Lao Tzu. So water is altruistic because it supports life. Water is modest and humble because it always takes the lowest ground. Water is adaptable and flexible because it can stay in a container of any shape. Water is transparent and clear. So we were very much wanting those ideas to be embedded in the book and embedded in the way we think about leading and organizing. Next slide, please, Rosie. Who was the book aimed for? It's aimed for anybody interested in working towards a better future, a better society, a better planet, a more sustainable future in any sector and people at any stage. So I imagine this book would appeal to people just entering their organizational careers as much as people sitting at the in leadership roles within their organizations. So we wrote, whether you were founders, entrepreneurs, private, public, or third sector managers, if you care about creating a more humane organization that can meet future needs, better support your employees, and in turn contribute to a better world, this book is for you. And we hope that we've achieved this, and we hope that this book will be useful for all of those people. Hence, as Rosie said, every chapter has an action section, a kitchen section, as we call it, using the Caplor house, where people can really focus on, so what do we do with this? This is not just a theorizing book, this is a practical action-orientated book. Thank you. Just one more slide and then I'll hand over. So from me as well, we just wanted to keep saying to all of those of you who did play a part, as well as all of those of you who are going to read this book and contribute to our learning journey and our knowledge journey into making the world a better place. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to hand over to Kamal.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Yeah, and just to say, so my name is Kamal. I've been a Caplor Horizons advisor now for about 5 years. As Ian said, also director of a very small little NGO that works in India to shape creative learning spaces for young people at the margins in communities. And Paperboat works very closely with Caplor Horizons as a strategic partner. If I could have the next slide, please, Rosie. In terms of my involvement with the book, it's been pretty modest, really. I appreciate Ian's and Sharon's comments, but it was pretty modest involvement. I was involved in the chapter on becoming a learning organisation and was a critical friend and fed back comments on that chapter. And in that chapter, there is a theory called Theory U that has been something that I've been very interested in for now a number of years. And Joseph Jaworski, one of the pioneers of Theory U, describes it as the process by which transformational breakthroughs occur, the creation of knowledge that changes the world as we know it. So what Jaworski was trying to do was really understand in a deeper way how we arrive at breakthrough understandings, breakthrough insights that can really lead to radical change. Whilst he was researching the sort of contours of radical change and breakthrough thinking, he talked to a number of people, and one of those people that he talked to was someone called Brian Arthur, who was an economist and a complexity theorist at the Santa Fe Institute. And he was the one that introduced Joseph Jaworski to the idea of mapping this trajectory in terms of a U. But he also, Joseph worked alongside other colleagues, including Otto Scharmer, who had developed, who'd written a book on U theory and has developed an online learning course that he runs out of MIT in the States called ULab. And Joseph and Otto interviewed a lot of change makers, entrepreneurs, thought leaders to, whilst they were trying to understand what is it about, the U process that leads to deep change. And one of the people that actually Joseph and Otto interviewed was Charles Handy, who's very well known in the Caplor Horizons community, and I believe contributed to the book and has contributed in many, many ways over the years to Caplor Horizons. And in terms of my comments about the U process, it's obviously much more nuanced than my comments are going to, suggest at the moment. But so I'm just going to give a very broad brush of what the U is about and then relate it to the book. So on the left-hand side of the U is really about engaging with the world in a deeper way. It's about observing, it's about going through a process of deep listening, deep observation, so we can understand challenges, issues, problems in a much deeper way. And at the heart of that process is a sort of a self-reflective journey that requires us to become much more aware of our rigid mental models, our narrow assumptions, our preconceptions, our prejudices. And by being more aware of those rigid mental models, hopefully reaching out to people who might see the problem or challenge in different ways. And empathy is really important there. Listening to people who might see the world or think about things in a different way is a really important part of that, going down the left-hand side of the U. And then what Joseph and others argue is you get to this place of a place of deeper knowing, which is really about that's how, by being more open-minded, by being more receptive to different ways of thinking, that's where the breakthrough insights occur. And then once you are in this sort of creative space where you have breakthrough insights, then the idea is to move swiftly up the right-hand side of the U. And in ULab, they talk about rapid prototyping of ideas. So now is not the time for rigid 5-year plans mapping out change. It's the time to prototype, adapt, iterate, refine, play, tinker, and then evolve the model through this adaptive and iterative process. So that, in a very sort of brief and simplistic way, is what the U theory is about. And Rosie, if I could have the next slide, please. And it occurred to me when I was looking at the various different chapters in the book that actually the chapters could tessellate really quite nicely with the different stages of the U process. So there's something about connecting with the world outside and observing and listening to the world more deeply. And we can see that in the chapters around the learning organization, the worldly organization, the human organization. But then there's also a lot of chapters that talk about that reflecting and that retreating to a deeper place of knowing, connecting with the world within, such as Lynn's chapter on the soulful organization, the reflective organization. And then there are a range of other chapters that are about rapidly, bringing forth new ventures, acting on breakthrough insights and reflection, things like the influencing organization, the proactive organization, the connected organization, and sustainable futures. So I thought there was a really nice sort of mapping onto the U of the chapters. And the bit that really interests me about the U process is that inward journey. What is it about that sort of deep dive into ourselves that helps us sort of, not only reach breakthrough insights, but also connect with other human beings in a deeper way as a result of that sort of internal process of self-reflection? And there's a really lovely little vignette in the learning organization chapter, which is about it's a little Zen story where a university professor goes to a monk and says, I want to learn about Zen, and the monk invites him to sit down at the table and starts pouring him a cup of tea. And the university lecturer is pontificating about all that he knows about Zen and giving his insights, and the monk just sits quietly listening and continuing to pour the cup of tea. And the university lecturer continues, and then eventually the tea overflows, and the lecturer says, "What are you doing? Can't you see that that cup won't hold any more tea?" And the monk says, that this cup is like your mind. It's so full that you're not able to hold any new learning. And for me, that is, goes to the heart of the U process. It's about moving into that sort of more open, receptive mindset that allows us to think differently, see differently, and have sort of radical new insights into problems and challenges. And I think the book has an awful lot to speak to us about these kind of processes. I think that it's an incredibly useful resource for that. And I just want to close by just giving a little case study from one of our partner organizations called CEDAR, and there are people on the webinar from CEDAR today, so it's lovely to see them today, and that just gives a nice little insight into the U in action, really. This was, when COVID first hit in India, and it's now sort of reached very substantial proportions in India, the second highest incidence of COVID cases in the world today. But when COVID hit, our partner CEDAR, who were helping to shape and set up creative learning spaces, they had to radically change their approaches to programs and pivot their budget and pivot their program approaches. What they did was they listened very deeply to the communities and said, what is it that you need? And the communities were saying, what we really need is urgent humanitarian relief. We need food, we need hygiene supplies. And CEDAR's initial response was, actually, we're not really geared up to providing humanitarian relief. We're not a humanitarian relief agency. But the more they listened to the communities, the more they realized if they were to continue and maintain a relationship of trust in those communities, they needed to listen to the real needs and the real priorities that the communities were articulating. So they delivered, humanitarian relief to about 1,000 children and their families who were falling through government welfare measures, and provided food and provided hygiene supplies. But they also looked more deeply at what was going on in the communities, and they realized that actually there are deeper dynamics at play here. Whilst our children's hubs have been shut down, whilst the schools have been closed, our children are being locked out of learning opportunities. And whereas children from much more affluent communities had access to online learning, the children in our communities were not able to access those kind of opportunities. So they not only produced a resource that allowed, it was a home learning resource that they distributed with all the food so that communities could have access to creative learning. They also started experimenting with digital technology. So when the hubs reopened, they started to, children had access to online learning opportunities. And just this final slide gives a nice little sort of 30-second flavor of those digital you know, the digital technology that we're piloting in the hubs, I think. So that was just a very, very brief insight into how we're using some of that technology. And it was sort of going through that process of initially deepening the listening in the communities, responding rapidly, and then prototyping new ideas that illustrates the U. And we're starting to sort of develop some quite interesting, you know, new projects on the back of this, and getting government attention and media attention. And interestingly, we're starting to work with an organisation called Rios Partners, who have worked with Joseph Jaworski and Otto Sharma to develop innovation labs for children to take them on the U process, and that's coming off the back of this. So I think, you know, so I just want to sort of close really by saying that I think the book is going to be a profoundly important resource for change makers like Paperboat and change makers like CEDAR to help them think differently, act differently, and learn differently whilst we're going through this, you know, these significant change processes. And it's been great to be part of the book in some small way. So thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Kamal. So Lynn, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to be here and part of this process. I've been a chief exec for 17 years and started experimenting with spirituality and soul in business since I was a dean of a business school in the 80s. And a key question that was always asked is really, do you walk your talk? And a lot of research has shown that congruence is the thing that people like most and dislike when they don't find it in their leaders. So I have the delight today of being able to talk you through how, as a team together, co-creating this book, we were really conscious of walking our talk. And as Kamal's looked at Theory U, I'm going to look at the Caplor Leaderful Way that looks at synchronous service and soul. And for me, just very briefly, I was involved in 2 books at the same time, writing a section for a book that was produced very traditionally, which was fine, but very different, and the Caplor process. So next slide, Rosie, please. So basically, many hands, light work. We were naturally teal. If you don't know Laloux's work, look at it. It comes from spiral dynamics, but we were teal. So we were working together, simultaneously taking on leadership roles or not, as and when it was appropriate, being deeply leaderful. There were many hands, light work. We had a common purpose, high standard. We all knew, respect, and want to be and live the Caplor culture. We had very clear collective ways of working. We were consistently learning from each other, changing ideas, shifting, moving as suggestions and proposals were made. And we made so many changes, I couldn't count them, but there were continual change and improvements. But what was a delight is we all saw that as something positive and that we welcomed. So a fantastic, and in that sense, in Laloux, that would be evolutionary purpose. We had a really clear sense we wanted this book to be different. And we allowed emergence as well, because we didn't have a fixed picture of how it would be. And we're all delighted. Next slide, please, Rosie. So if you look at soulfulness, I believe very strongly that soulfulness is linked to your state of being and the work that you do in terms of reflection and awareness and authenticity. So what were the authors, because I'm speaking as an author, everybody actually, we were in service to a bigger cause. The book success was bigger than our egos. We weren't going to have names in it at one point, and I found it fascinating how everybody really responded, that nobody wanted this to be a way that their name was made. Caplor, as an entity that we all love and we all work for and we're all connected to, was bigger than that for us. That meant the difference. Very strongly interconnected perspectives. We all understood what peer co-creation means, deeply respectful, and we were keen to model soulfulness. And something that's really important, I think, there was a high competence that Sharon's already referred to. We were a highly competent as well as committed team. And my last slide, in terms of the support that as an author we received was incredible. Strong communication all the way through, lots of coming together on Zoom, invaluable guidance and clarity. As I've just said, the regular group sessions online, excellent editorial team that were not afraid to have fierce conversations. So they were supportive, but they were also challenging, and really knew what the bigger picture was and how to coordinate that. So we had common language and a common style, not common language, common style. So genuine co-creation and constant feedback. So I'm aware of time. So again, I just want to say, as someone who can be very critical of people who don't walk the talk, and I love kind of looking at where people's shadows are living and manifesting in terms of awareness, that just didn't happen in this project. There was smoothness, emergence, and a flow that happened all the way through. And now I'll hand over to Ian.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. So in terms of what are we going to do next, the next part of it is going to be to go into breakout groups, and we're going to have a discussion. And at the very beginning, we set out what the themes of the book were. So the themes are there in front of you. Learning, being proactive, that's things around strategy, being connected, the human organization, which links into neuroscience, and the soulful organization, the worldly organization, influencing advocacy, the importance of reflection. That was a decision to make that very prominent, and thinking about sustainable futures and how we could look at the sort of roundedness of how to achieve in a holistic way a sustainable future. So, and then the new horizons. So those are the different themes, and the practicality there is on the right hand side, where on each of the chapters it sort of stresses what the key messages were in the chapter, what are the reflective questions, what are the action and impact questions that one could take from this, and further reading. So that's an illustration of kind of each chapter, and beautiful designs and overall creativity from Simon and Ben Oldroyd there in the middle. So again, we've tried to use images and quotes and different ways to really bring it to life throughout. So with that in mind, if I just go to the next slide. So this is an opportunity now to go into small groups and to have a discussion about the book. Now, recognizing lots of you, this is about the book that you will read rather than the book that you've not maybe even dipped into yet, but a lot of you have done and given us feedback already about the book. So thank you for lots of people that have read it. But this is it's a conversation for everybody. So everybody can talk about those themes that I've just set out, and particularly some of the chapter authors are leading different areas. So for instance, Clive is a facilitator in his group, and he wrote one of the chapters which is linked to the human organization and neuroscience. So you can dive into that particular topic with him or go more widely. And then to think, well, how would you use that? How would you use the book practically within for yourself, for the team, for the organization, or more widely in society? And particularly excited, we've got various people on the call who are representing different organizations that can really get the word out there. So for instance, DOCUS, the umbrella body for Ireland, for NGOs, a key representative from there is here, and I'm talking this morning even about having a launch in Ireland with NGOs there, which is great. So for those of you that have that opportunity to think, how could we get the book out more widely, then we'd be excited to do that. But also for every individual can download the book as a PDF or share the link. It's on our website. And to think, well, how can you kind of spread the word? It's freely available to everybody. It's a completely voluntary effort. So yeah, so that's the plan. So now Rosie's going to start to divide you all into different groups. We're going to keep to sort of time more or less. So we'll come back after just over 20 minutes. And then we'll have a plenary session and share some of the outputs of the groups. So thank you, Rosie. We'll go into the groups now.
I accidentally left my room early.
I did the same. And I was in the middle of saying something.
Sorry to my group, I accidentally clicked the leave room button halfway through saying something.
I did the exact same thing. I don't know if everyone's back now. Apologies.
Returned mid-sentence.
Oh,
Hey Chris, you weren't going to be in my group.
he couldn't, I don't think he could connect.
Oh, I can't see him. Maybe he's not connected.
That cut back to the plenary session was brutal, wasn't it? It's this second, bang, you're off.
Oh no.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody. I'm just going to kind of facilitate this part of the session, and I think the group, the people that were facilitating the groups, are going to ask people to feedback from the groups. So I'm going to look out for comments that come to me in the chat. But I'll start off with my group because we already rehearsed who was going to say something. So just while I'm waiting for others, if I could invite Rick, if you're there, Rick, just to say your point about the kind of the trust and trustworthy leaders. I thought that we thought that would be very interesting for everybody to hear.
Hi, thank you. Morning, everyone. Yes, I was just sort of relating, this whole COVID crisis in 2020, really blowing apart the myth that we can actually predict the future, and the sort of forecasting that is so much part of any sort of strategic thinking or strategic direction of an organization, and maybe putting more emphasis on, if we're not absolutely sure about the future, then maybe it's more about do we trust the leadership, and that the crisis has almost exposed that trust bank account that leadership might have. And again, notwithstanding that leadership is distributed, the organizational culture, and whether it is one of trust. And in the end, the question will be not necessarily is that the right direction to go, because we don't know, but do we trust the leadership and the basis of which these decisions are being made? So the importance of trust. And
I think that just to spin off on that, Catherine, if I could invite you just to come in to go to that individual level around vulnerability and link to the trust point, I think, for organizations. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And hi, everyone. Yes, so I love the elements in the book where you're promoting a culture where people feel they can make mistakes and that they're learning from mistakes and that people can bring their whole selves. I guess for me, there's a piece before that, which is, what are the, what's the scaffolding that enables people to bring their vulnerability into an organization? How far are organizations already recognizing this mental health epidemic that we're in that's not going to go away, and how to catch that early enough so that people can be supported and organizations can have a voice where they can really feel heard before it gets to the point where it's showing in the well-being agenda, benchmarks or sickness levels or whatever. And I just really think that level of psychological safety is so important. We need to think about in organizations, what does it look like for people, because it's a very individual experience.
Brilliant. Thank you, Catherine. I'm just going to bring in Jeff is going to speak on behalf of a group. So Jeff, are you there, Jeff? Could you give your insights?
Yes, I am. Our discussion started with part of Sharon's slide, which was about this has been a 2-year journey. And I was just describing some of my crisis of faith about, are we already out of date by the time we, a book is necessarily a moment in time. And then I realized that it's probably the wrong question. And the discussion in our group was around scaffolding the learning that comes from the book. So if we have made a statement about this is what we believe the future of organization could be, what more can we offer by way of scaffolding to help people move towards those futures? So we were discussing several options in there. We talked about film, talked about creating some film material alongside it, particularly when people don't have time, time poor people who don't have time to read the book. Could we encapsulate it in a set of future visions about what organisation could be. We also talked about having webinars on a regular basis themed around each chapter. So town halls that bring people together to discuss the chapter subjects and what they're doing with them. And the final one, the talking about how important people's voices were, and I think that's been illustrated in this this gathering so far, that when people are speaking from their heart and from their experience about the content, how powerful it becomes. So one idea was to instigate a series of podcasts where individuals who've contributed to the book or benefited from the book could kind of record some material to talk about where they are taking the book and some ideas about where others could take the book.
Oh, fantastic!
Thanks to Vicky for hosting that one.
Okay, thank you. I know Mariama, if you're there from the Gambia, I gather your internet connection is going in and out with Usman, etc. You've got a great thing to say about women in leadership, I gather, in terms of. Are you able to talk to that? Maybe. Are you there, Mariam? Can't hear you.
Her audio is not working.
Oh, okay, not to worry. We'll come back if we can. Denise, I think you're going to summarize, and then Lancia is going to speak on something on community engagement. You there, Denise?
Denise,
Yeah.
you're on mute.
Denise, you're on mute, yeah.
Apologies, I'm going to just speak briefly and then hand over to Lancia, as you said, Ian. And I was asked to speak because of a comment I made about how I felt about the book, the impact that it had on me. And I felt it was very unconstrained, that actually, it was actually exhausting to read, because I sort of stopped halfway through, and that's its strength really, that throughout, whatever the chapters are, these enticing titles, that it draws you to really ask more questions. And then very much threaded through is to try lots of things and see what works. And we had sort of comments around, John made a really useful comment around, yeah, you can use them as a user manual. That's what you would do. You often wait till something's broken, you get to the user manual. And so it's got that very practical way about it as well. And Fiona made a very good point around COVID and how now we're bringing our personal selves into the workplace. We wouldn't have done before, but we're now sitting in our homes, everybody's seeing us. There's some sort of vulnerability around that. And we're bringing our personal self as well as our business self in, and how we can make that work. And there was a question around sustainability. So with that, trying lots of things, we have to bring our whole selves into whatever we're doing. Look at the book, ask more questions. And when we were talking about COVID, Sharon asked a question, is it still relevant during COVID? And there was this sort of silence, and we thought, yes, it is. But John made a comment around, well, actually, we're grieving. And so how do we work through this grief, this shock that we feel? And the book very powerfully is relevant because it talks about the strength of dreaming, of stories, and it's through that. What came to mind then was Kamal, you talking about Theory U, and how really at the moment it's an inward dive. We need to make that deeper dive in order to get that deep connection. And this book very much offers that. So I hope I've done that justice for the team. And I'm going to hand over to Lancia to talk about how it will work with a community of Christian brothers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I haven't read the whole book yet, but when I read the introductory part, I was touched, and I saw that it related quite well with one of the approaches that we are using under the Congregation of Christian Brothers, which is called community engagement. I saw a lot of common traits. For instance, when you talk about being soulful, you know, when you're engaging with a community, you have to be in their shoes, to empathize with them, imagine or rather feel that you are with them in whatever they are going through. That will help you get the most out of the needs assessment. For instance, if you're doing a needs assessment or an evaluation or whatever. And respect for the communities is very, very key to that. And that is also a trait that we use under community engagement. And this book also talked about connectedness, being connected with the communities. It also talks about being worldly. I find that to be very important, because we have to think big, not just be in a box and think about the immediate problems, but we have to think about how other problems in the world affect the communities that we are working with, and how we, together with the community, can contribute towards ameliorating the problems that the world is facing. Just to echo some of the sentiments that were brought forward regarding COVID-19, we are saying that as a learning organization, we have learned a few things, for instance, on how to approach meetings or workshops. We are able to do it differently, but also bearing in mind that we have to achieve the objectives that the organization has set. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lancia. That was great. I've been suggested, Pandian, I understand you have something very interesting to say around the importance of spirituality and the work in India at the moment, in Tamil Nadu, that you're involved with. Are you there, Pandian?
Yeah, I'm there.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when we had a discussion in the breakout session, we found the bringing soulfulness in the organization is very much important. And also what I thought, that practice has to be taken out, and we have to take to the the society, to the larger society, to promote a kind of the pluralism and the plural recognition that really brings harmony and the spirituality around the human lives. Because the country like India, the recent trend is the brutal form of violence and the brutal form of rape against the young women, particularly from the Dalit community, most marginalized section, is seriously increasing. And the state become a muted spectator, and we could not expect any justice. So ultimately, the human should build a kind of human society. So we need to really take the spirituality around the larger human society. We really need to build very, very equal and dignified life of everyone. So that way I looked at the spirituality should go beyond the organization. That's what I felt. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you, Pandian. I'm just wondering, is Mariama, are you able to speak now with your point? Just to try that one. Still problem with the microphone, I think. Do you want to try again, Mariama? Still struggling. I'll come back to you, Mariama, again. Nicola, I gather you're feeding back from your group. Would you go ahead? Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, got you. Carry on. Great.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think it has been a very, very fruitful presentation that has happened. I think this book that you are launching is very, very much important, considering key issues that have been highlighted, which are very much crucial in the development of our organization, United Purpose, because we are working with a lot of women groups out there. looking at women leadership is something that is that has been a challenge. And then if you look at the presentations that have happened, that have been that we're going on, it really helps you to understand the process of change, making change. Yes, because it is something that we are really much interested in knowing, because we are working with women that really need to understand the process of change, how they can become influential change makers in decision-making process, and how they can also become change agents of the development that they really want. So I think overall, a lot of key issues are highlighted here, which will really help us to work with our women in order to boost their capacity to become the leaders that they themselves want. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mariama. Good. Thank you. Nicola, shall I just bring you in now? I gather you're going to feedback for your group.
Hi, thanks, Ian. Yeah, we had some really useful information and feedback. Sue started our conversation, and her background is HR. So she was saying that to her it was sort of a joyous moment to see a book that was focusing very much on the human side of business. And that sort of, you know, people are our biggest asset, the most sort of used and misused term, but this really felt that this book was sort of walking the talk, as Lynn was saying earlier. The other discussion that we talked about was Farry was saying how pleased she was that it was online, how accessible and slick it felt, and we had a good conversation about the fact that because it's online and it's sort of free at source, this allows this book to sort of level the playing field to some extent. You know, allows people of all sort of economic situations to access this really useful, powerful resource. So again, that's about sort of the Caplor family really, you know, walking their values. And Chinraj was extremely useful as part of our group as well, explaining how he felt this, that they've been looking for sort of this paradigm shift for a long time, and that this book really gave a sort of a logical structure for that new language and that sort of paradigm shift. So some really fruitful conversations. And right at the very end of the session, Simon Aldroyd explained to us all that, you know, if you haven't read all of the book, or you haven't read the book in detail, if you do one thing, you should. And at that moment, we were kicked out of our groups and back into the main session. So I wondered if I could just invite Simon to finish that sentence for the whole group.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Nicola. Yeah, it might have been similar in other groups, but in our group, I'm not sure if anybody read the book apart from me. Maybe I'm doing the whole group misservice, but the vast majority hadn't. And obviously we're all under time constraints, and it's quite a good dippy book, so you can flick through it, and it's quite, the concepts are quite split up. So you can either look at it, if you're an observatory person, all you need to really do is read the observatory sections in each chapter. Each chapter goes the external environment, because we have to relate to the outside world, otherwise we just live in our own little silo. So every chapter starts with the external environment, and then it goes on to the observatory, and then the library, and then the family room, then the foundations, and it finishes with the kitchen. And what I was going to say, and it pains me as an observatory person to say this, but if you do nothing else, just read the kitchen pages. They're single pages, and Jeff, who I can see down there in the middle of my screen, Jeff and I had a lot of conversations at the beginning when we were first starting to think about the book, and it was the use of organize as a verb rather than organization as a noun, and we felt it was really important to give some practical advice. We didn't want this book just to be full of hot air, basically. We wanted to be able to, it to be a manual that people can actually use. So if you do nothing else at all, just look at the kitchen sections, because it's going to give you some brilliant advice.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you, Fiona. I just bring Danielle in. I gather, Danielle, COVID has made you think differently about things. Would you like to share that with people and how that might be relevant to you?
Yeah, we were talking about sort of bringing your whole self to work, and I was saying that during the COVID period, I've always been employed by either an SME or corporate, and actually during COVID, I decided to go self-employed fully, because taking that time during COVID to kind of stop and really think about what's important to you, it really made me think about what it is I want to do and who I want to work with. So it was actually for me, that kind of period over COVID had a really positive impact in making me think about what's really important to me and what do I want to go after, and how do I want to help people. And so I made that decision to go fully self-employed. So it's interesting how the world stopping for a while has made me, and others, and I think there's a lot of people in my position who have made quite big decisions over this period. So it's quite interesting how it's made that happen.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I've still got quite a lot of people that want to comment. We'll have to draw it to a close. Lorna's going to close the whole session, but one or two more general comments about the book. I don't know, Ian Bruce, if you're able to. There's too many Ians on this call, but I don't know, Ian, if you've got any. You've probably been involved with non-profit books and education and promotion, and anybody on this call. I don't know what your perspectives on the book would be, or how we should be getting it out there. You're on mute, Ian.
The thing that attracted me to the book was that it came from Caplor. I was particularly struck by the discussion in our group, and in particular in this feedback session, about the trust thing and the values, and the importance of, as one of the introducers said, walking the talk. And that's what I see Caplor doing. In terms of getting the book out there, that's a tough one. I think you've got to rely on your champions, as you are at the moment. And I think the cooperation with other organizations, Seamus, I know from Ireland, is hoping to be doing something jointly with you. Forming partnerships with other organizations is a brilliant way of getting ideas out, isn't it? Because it's part of a co-creation mechanism. So I would think the more you can do of that, the wider it's going to go.
Great, thank you, thanks, Ian. And Minka, I gather you've got on Ian's point about being a partner, with Ella's being a partner, but did you have a point about getting the book out there as well? Maybe linked to something Jeff was saying as well, perhaps?
Yeah, only very similar, about doing kind of mini lectures on YouTube about it, and perhaps some form of sort of interviews on a podcast. Yeah,
okay, that's very good. Lorna, do you want to feedback on behalf of your group as well? I know you're going to close at the end, but maybe you could bring in perspective.
Yeah, I'll just feed 2 points back, really. The first one was, we were having a conversation about the format of the book, and it was felt by people in my group that it was quite hard to read online. People with dyslexia, for example, found that difficult, and also not an easy format. So we talked about that. And that really led us to, so there was some appetite to have it printed in a sort of hard copy as well. There was also, it led us on to a discussion about leading from the emerging future. And one of the groups suggested that, it is now time for the older people to kind of move out of the way for the next generation, because they were the leaders of tomorrow. And I think the conversation then went around, well, actually, that is real leadership. To have that position of embodied power and then be willing to give it up and hand it over was really a good demonstration of what leading from the future could look like. So I think they were the main points I'd feedback. We obviously had a really creative discussion, but I think essentially it was those 2 points.
Thanks, Lorna. Bai, are you able to feedback your point that you've written in the chat, if that's okay? You're on mute at the moment, Bai. Yeah. You're on mute, Bai.
Okay, as I was saying, are you getting me clearly now?
Yeah, all good now, yeah.
Good, thank you. As I was saying, thinking more out of the box. Box is the principle of Caplor. When Caplor engaged us in the Gambia, is working with the community, being with people, listening to people, and working closely with them to get their perception, especially in this very dire situation of COVID-19, where in the Gambia, the issue of denial is very strong. And if you look at the book, I've read through part of the book where it's talking about connectivity with the people. This is very key in the book. And this is where Caplor joins us with Sosola, so you know about that already. And this is a group that cut across the whole country, which is having more than 5, 6, 7,000 people in the country joining to form that Sosola. So it's a huge group in terms of the numbers of also the size of the, considering the size of the Gambia. So COVID-19 in the Gambia is an issue of denial. So our engagement, continuous engagement with the people is to refute the idea of this denial and bringing in key issues that people must believe in the reality of life, and COVID-19 is an issue of reality of life. So thank you so much, Caplor, for connecting us to all these people across the Gambia.
Fantastic. Usman, I don't know if I could bring you in to link to what Bai was saying there from your perspective in terms of connectivity, and because you work with a lot of different organizations as well in the Gambia.
Yes, I think Bai's point is an important one. Looking at Sosalaso, a strong WhatsApp group that kind of connect a lot of the members. We are in virtual discussion most of the time. And I think that is very important. And we have realized that a lot of confidence has also been built among the members. And now they are encouraging other members to join the WhatsApp group. So that if you look at the WhatsApp group daily, you generate information and you pass information. I think it's really interesting.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. Well, we're just coming to a close now. So I'll just hand over to Lorna, but I'd just like to say a personal thank you to everybody. Please do get the book out as far and wide as you can. And if you have any questions or comments, then please bring them in. But Lorna, over to you. Yeah.
I think I'd just really like to end. We've had lots of thank yous for people contributing to the book, but a real thank you to every one of you for engaging with us around it as well, because whether you're partners, whether you're colleagues, whether we've met you once or 100 times, it's great to have everyone's idea and enthusiasm, because I think it's that interconnectivity that really binds us together as a wider community. So I would just really like to say an hour and a half of your time, we really, really appreciate. And if you have any further conversations you want to have with any of us, please get in touch. If you have questions, it's always an open door. So please just get in touch and we can continue dialoguing in a different way. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.